Today we learned sadly that this settlement agreement has not been approved. I'm deeply frustrated. It's a sad day for the many First Nations families learning today that their long wait for compensation and acknowledgement is going to continue. I don't know when or if compensation will flow to these kids and families at this stage. However, the tribunal identified further work that must be done in order to fully satisfy its orders on compensation. A late-stage intervention by the Caring Society and Cindy Blackstock has not only delayed compensation reaching our communities, but also disrupts the process of allocating an additional $19.8 billion that will help us reform the First Nations Child and Family Services program in our communities across Canada and across Manitoba. It's time for children and families to be compensated for the harms that were caused by decades of Canada's discrimination. It's time for the legal wrangling to be over, and for more than 300,000 First Nations children and families that were hoping to receive their compensation and acknowledgement that they are owed.
Well, the decision of the Human Rights Tribunal is very clear, and it's always been very clear. This government must respect their obligation to pay compensation to the children who have been put at risk through the willful and deliberate negligence of this government. For years, this government has attempted to avoid their responsibility. They've tried to ignore the jurisdiction of the Human Rights Tribunal. But at the end of the day, they cannot exclude children who are the most vulnerable and the most discriminated against in this country from this process.
It is, I think, disappointing to many First Nations people that a First Nations-led, Indigenous-designed approach hasn't been accepted as complete by the CHRT. There are a number of folks, I'm sure, around the country, First Nations individuals, that are wondering and worrying about when compensation might be due. And certainly, from our perspective, obviously, we're going to continue to work with First Nations partners and review the detailed findings of the CHRT and move forward.
Look, I think what next is we wait for the final decision. This was just a summary today. Obviously, we work with AFN. We work with the Caring Society. We work with NAN and all the other partners with whom we were working. As Minister Hajdu pointed out, this was very much an Indigenous-driven and Indigenous-led process and settlement. So we have to go back with our partners and see what the final decision is and see where we can move from there. But there's certainly no decision on anything today.
The work that's been done is not insignificant, and I don't want to leave the impression with listeners or viewers that there's no work that's been done since then. The work on long-term reform, this is a discussion we had with the Prime Minister directly, is how do we end this? And work to this day has gone on to make that significant change to fix a broken system. So it's much greater than simply this judgment, and I think that's something that we have strong reservations when we look at a court case like this and review it in the light of what may seem to be the only focal point in making sure children are safe in this country through financial compensation.